Everyone's different. The way that we heal, the way we show up best for our friends and family every single day and mostly for ourselves is different. My self-care practice is different than yours, Adi, and yours is different than the next person's. And that's beautiful. That is this new age of healing to me. Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we're here for going deep.
Yay! I feel like it's been a really long time since we did the last one. Maybe it was at the beginning of July, because this feels like a really long time ago.
Yeah.
What is time anyway?
Seriously. It's like the age of Corona. We're getting into the age of Aquarius, and we're passing through the age of Corona on the way.
Exactly.
Unexpected, though it may have been.
Yep.
Although now that I'm thinking about it, maybe every time before you go into a new age, there's like this massive destruction that
Cleansing.
happens.
Yeah, it's a cleansing.
I don't know. I'm going down a weird path here, guys. Today, we're going to wrap up this new age of healing month, and do we have a lot to talk about? You left us a lot to talk about, and I'm going to start that trend with the review of the week because I'm looking for a drum beat.
Oh, let me see if I can find it. Hold on. Oh, there it is.
Thank you very much for that, ma'am. I think your drum beats are getting better. The drum rolls, they're pretty powerful.
That means a lot.
All right. This one might not be what you expect from Molly Z. If you're a feminist or confident, I assume that's woman, and then it cuts her off. Just left off a 1-star review saying, "Did I miss something? This guy cheated on his wife and they're bragging about it? What kind of low self-worth female disempowerment is this? Dear ladies, if a man, especially your husband, cheats on you, you are never supposed to talk to him again outside of signing divorce papers and dividing assets. This 1950s mentality of staying together for the kids no matter what a man does is radically opposed to their vibe of sophisticated and new age." And then it ends. I think there was more to that sentence. Thank you, Molly. First of all, we're all about radical transparency. So when we get one of these, we want to work on it. And we're going to end up talking about this quite a bit. And maybe in a turn that you didn't expect, Molly, if somebody tells you this, because I have a feeling you're not exactly listening to all of our podcast episodes, you have just won an Ignited care package. So thank you for joining us.
Honest review.
You get my book, which you may not want to read. You get some of Sophie's products, which you probably will want to put in your smoothies, regardless of how you feel about her choices in men, and so much more. Sophie, I think you have a quote that kind of goes along with this.
Yes. So my quote, actually I have two that are pretty similar that really resonated. The first one is by Debbie Brown, and it says, "The pattern has repeated because the work is incomplete." And the second one is similar, and it says, "We repeat what we don't repair." So both of these quotes I really felt drawn to share today after reading this review, because the thing is it was kind of an understanding. I don't think that I don't really feel like she went deep in researching our actual story. So we want to just kind of clarify a little bit more today for anyone who might be confused about why we share our story and how we got there. And just to clarify, just when it comes to the facts, like we weren't actually married when any of that happened. We didn't have children when all of our cheating happened. And
I think there's part of this is clarifying and making clear, but also people are allowed to have their own notions.
For sure.
It's always interesting to me when somebody believes that because they would do things a certain way, everybody else must do them the same way.
Right.
That's a little off, in my opinion. But I also totally get it. Molly gets to leave whoever she wants who cheats on her whenever that happens.
I also had that very strong belief too until it happened. I also, many times in life, have had a strong belief and opinion and judgment on something. Man, I can't believe she did that. Man, I can't believe she stayed with him. Gosh, she's so weak. Or whatever the judgment is on whatever it is, and have a judgment and a belief on how I would handle it. And then I'm in the situation and it ends up being completely different, because every situation is unique and we deserve to give it the respect to show up and be present to that situation and not respond how you think you should respond.
Yeah, and I think there's also, there's work to be done on ourselves all the time in life. And there's this concept a lot of you must have heard of called spiritual bypassing. And that's the idea that you say to yourself, well, I'm too woke, or I'm too released, or I'm too adult, or I'm too smart to deal with this thing. I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to let it affect me. I'm going to let it wash over me and stay in my meditation practice and not let it impact my life. And I totally get that. Sometimes you end up leaving things or ignoring things that actually need to be addressed and worked on in you and in other relationships you have. And we didn't do that for a while. I mean, when I cheated on Sophie, we were dating. We weren't married.
I was 21.
And there were definitely other things that happened later on around like sex and porn and things of that nature. But, like physical cheating with another person in the world didn't occur after that. But that's like a small point of what we're saying. What we're saying is we did get to work right away. One of the things here is don't just expect things to change. Sophie put up really, really strong boundaries, right? We were not together for a year. And then when we got back together, she said, we've got to go do work on this. We got to go see a couples therapist if we're going to date again, not be married, date. And she put up very strong, very empowered boundaries. It is definitely true that for a while in this concept, and I don't think I'm speaking for you, Sophie, and I'd love to hear you, in this concept of like spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
For a while, Sophie said, you have work to do. You've got to do all this work. And we saw the results of that about 5 years into the process, 4 years into the process, when Sophie, maybe not feeling as empowered as otherwise, maybe not asking for exactly what she needed, whatever, I'm going to let Sophie speak to this part on her own. But Sophie, from our stories, those of you who have been listening for a while, cheated herself. And so if you conduct spiritual bypassing, if you avoid doing your own work in the name of being woke or being better than, it'll come to bite you back in the ass sometimes without you really realizing it. So we're not saying by any stretch of the imagination, just go in a situation, don't work out the way you want them to, and then just cross your fingers and hope it gets better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is such a deeper, more nuanced situation than this person. Obviously, Molly, I would love to talk to you personally. We would both love to talk to you if you are listening. This is a nuanced situation. It's really easy to just think you have everything figured out, and if this thing happens to me, then I'm out. But the reality is, in our situation, and every situation is different. Obviously, if there's domestic violence, if there's anything that like crosses a line that just doesn't feel right in your soul, to me, there was something wrong, but it wasn't. It was something deeper than what was on the surface. It wasn't about the actions at hand. And later, as the years passed and as we continued to uncover the work and do the work and show up for one another, that's when we learned that it wasn't just what was on the surface. Just as the work that Adi does with addicts, it's not about alcohol. It's not about drugs. It's about the deeper seated issue. And because I loved Adi and our connection was so strong, and after spending a year apart, I realized that there really wasn't a love like this, and that even though I was dating other people, like what we had was really, really fucking special and unique. And he was doing the work on his own, and he was seeing a therapist, and he was already changing, not even thinking he could get me back. And then when he came to the table, he was a slightly changed version of who he was with an open heart. So when I said, it's time to get some therapy, he was down. And then we got to work together. And I think that you have to look underneath a little bit and really start to see, like, uncover what is the deeper rooted issue. Yes, Adi had a lot of stuff going on internally, but I did too. There's something about me. If I look at the situation now, I see so clearly I was very broken. And I attracted this person that I thought was just going to be a perfect version of a man, which doesn't exist. FYI, in case anyone was wondering, there is no perfect.
Oh, you were looking at me, so I thought you were looking at me to say I am the perfect version of a man.
Right. Anyway,
I'm sorry, I got confused.
Right. There is no perfect, and you all know this deep in your core. I'm not perfect. I'm deeply flawed. Adi's not perfect. He's deeply flawed. We're working together to be the best versions of who we are. But having a teammate, having someone in this relationship that wants to fight with you and wants to show up and do the work and wants to help you be the best version of you, this is what Adi did for me. Even though we had conflict and he had this deep-seated thing that he hadn't truly healed from, he was trying to bypass the reason he was a drug addict.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to bypass intimacy with you, right, by not doing the work and pretending like, well, I've already dealt with my work. I'm good. And these
and then
quotes,
here it came. It showed up again in a different form.
and
as it does.
These quotes you love, and you say to me a lot, like we repeat what we don't repair. The pattern is repeated because the work is incomplete. Like these things keep showing up. I was only the second guy you were with, and the cheating came up again. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that the responsibility for my cheating was on you. But there is an indication from the work we've done up until now that if we didn't do the work together to fix it, there was potential that the next guy was going to cheat on you.
Absolutely.
And the next guy after that, and the next guy. And so we are doing the work. Just to be really clear, we're doing the work for ourselves. Each of us has to do the work for ourselves. Me to become a better man, Sophie to become a better woman, or a more authentic version of herself. And then we get to come together into a relationship that is empowered by that work. So, if I didn't break up with Sophie and I didn't do work for that year, I would have still been that guy.
Yeah.
And you have to show up. I think the reason this was so prescient to me is we're doing this month, we're ending this month of New Age of Healing, and there's a huge transition in the world, a huge transition in the field. We had Nicole Pearl on, the Holistic Psychologist, and there's all this huge kind of conflict around whether she should be saying the things that she's saying. Obviously, in the field of addiction, a lot of people are really mad at me for what I'm talking about.
And the work you're doing.
People every once in a while, and especially around this BLM movement and racial inequality and the stuff that you got really involved in, Sophie, talk about privilege and white privilege and how we have been going one way and we need to adjust course. And this stance of, hey, I know how I'm supposed to act in this situation and there's nobody that can tell me differently because I know the right way is dangerous in my opinion. Somebody left some pretty upsetting comments about the Holistic Psychologist, and there's whole accounts that are now dedicated to bitching her out.
They've sent us direct messages.
And they DM'd us. But let me be clear, if it's not clear from our personal relationship, we don't believe in cancel culture.
No.
We believe it's insane to just block out anybody who makes noise that you're not comfortable with. All that's going to end up happening through that is we're going to get smaller and smaller versions of reality for ourselves and for other people. And we will never be able to create dialogue.
Yeah. People are allowed to have different opinions than you. People are allowed to practice psychology in different ways than you are used to. People are allowed to heal from addiction in different ways than the AA model. People are allowed to heal from cheating in another way other than leaving.
Things that seem completely normal to each and every one of you listening right now were at one point in time called crazy. Just so we're clear. And if the world would have listened, then those things would have never shown up. Like, nobody was supposed to buy these crazy big metal machines that were really expensive and move people around. Everybody was fine. They had horses, they had buggies, they had donkeys, they could walk, bicycles. The idea that people were going to get into these death machines and drive around and potentially kill each other and animals on the road was seen as insane. The concept that one day everybody will have a computer in their hand that is as powerful as the biggest computers that have ever existed in the history of mankind, and you'd be able to FaceTime people. That was like on the frickin' Jetsons. Like, let's be very clear. There are things you consider normal right now that will be completely blown out of the water within 10, 15, 20 years, and there are things that you consider insane right now that will be normal by that standpoint. This idea of the new age of healing is about, hey, let's bring in a new perspective, a new way of looking at what's happening. And that is, in my opinion at least, let's be more inclusive. Let's be more open-minded. Let's be less fear-based.
And let's also, let's be less fear-based for sure. Let's also let ourselves be our own best healer. And not everyone knows how to do that. So that's why people like Nicole and like you can then come in and lead the way and teach the ways that have worked for you and worked for other clients. And as we share, how do people, like their self-care and the last 5 questions to every single podcast, everyone's different.
Yeah.
The way that we heal, the way we show up best for our friends and family every single day and mostly for ourselves is different. My self-care practice is different than yours, Adi, and yours is different than the next person's. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That is this new age of healing to me, is just like taking what's out there. There's so much information. You can take any course, any class. You can heal yourself from anything in this digital way. But it's up to you to really acknowledge that you have the power to heal.
Yeah, I mean, look, I used to live in a very what I call realist way of looking at the world for years, for decades. And the unfortunate side effect of that was that I was never happy. I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was always, anytime, literally, I'll never forget this, but when people were happy and optimistic and looking forward to life or thought of themselves as worthy, I thought they were lying to me. And I mean, it was so deep that it's so crazy to think of now, but like I knew that my way of seeing the world was right and that everybody else was just pretending. Like it was clear as day to me. And
but that's what happens when you're in a perspective where you're not willing to see out and you're not willing to let the light in or let some cracks reveal some light. Like we need to keep other perspectives in our world because it can get really dangerous.
I mean, look at what's happening with the world right now.
Yeah. People get just so in their own way, and it's like what we're trying to offer here is a different perspective and just, opening up our hearts, not being absolutist by any means, and turning more to love than to fear. And I also want to say another thing about like that quote that we read, that review. It's really about coming out of the victim mentality. So one thing that for me and my history, because these are all different circumstances and examples and experiences. For me personally, my mom left every job, every man, every single person, every friend. My mom just burnt bridges left and right. And I left my last relationship because it was so toxic. But when I met you, it was really important that I not just blame you and make myself the victim and say like, oh, he cheated on me. He made this huge mistake. And, therefore, like, I'm just going to leave because you're a piece of shit. Like, yes, I did break up with you in the moment because it needed to have a serious consequence, but I still loved you. And then when we found each other again a year later, it just made sense. And I think that having the hard boundaries when we got back together really allowed us to make it work. We had to figure out a way to make it work. And because we were so broken, that's what helped us feel safe. But me leaving would just, like you said, I would probably attract a very similar relationship the next time around. And that comes back to the quote. The pattern has repeated because the work is incomplete. We repeat what we don't repair. And there were parts in myself that needed such deep repairing. And you actually made me feel safe enough to look at those parts of myself. And sometimes we do need healthy relationships, even if it doesn't look on the surface like it's healthy. You were broken, I was broken, and we found each other. But we were willing to work and we were willing to change.
Yeah, and I think, look, just so it's clear, everybody, a month or 2 months after we broke up, we didn't know we were going to end up back together. It wasn't like you said to me, hey, you have some work to do. Right. Go do work and then come back. You just broke up with me. And when you left me, you left me. Yeah. So I deal with this with clients all the time. People assume that they know what's going to happen in the future. They assume, if I make decision A, then B, C, D, and E are going to happen after. If you've lived long enough, know that you can make what seems like the best decision on the face of the earth and it'll blow up in your face. And you can have something seemingly terrible happen to you and it'll be the best thing that's ever happened. So when you left me, that was the right decision for you to make. And the reason I know that is that was the thing that drove me to seeking inside of myself what needed to change and made me do that work.
Right.
When I ran into you 8 months, 9 months later, and we haven't spoken in a while, I was now in a different place and I could present in a way to you. And also all this thing, like my dad got really sick and was dying. Like all this other stuff had happened along the way that you had no idea about when you broke up with me, had nothing to do with our conversation. But life happens. And that's why I think it's so important to sort of like, we're not by any stretch telling you get back together with the people who cheated on you. We're not saying stay in a shitty job. We're not saying any of that stuff. What we're saying is, what would a loving, accepting, empathetic, trusting, empowered version of you make as a decision? Now go act from that decision.
Exactly. And sometimes the answer is going to be, I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to stay. I'm going to leave this loveless marriage. I'm going to, leave this man who just keeps deceiving. Yeah, exactly. A crappy job. this relationship. I've had to leave lots of friendships, but guess what? A lot of those friendships have come back around again because it's the next best version of who I am and the next best version of who they are. And we're not always in the same cycle of growth. Like growth is so cyclical. It's not a straight linear line. It's we go at different paces, and thank goodness you and I moved so oftentimes at the same pace, but it took a lot of effort to grow at the same pace. You know, when I graduated from college and you were still getting your PhD, I was young. I was 20 years old, and there was an enormous amount of pressure that you put on me to try and grow right now, decide what you want to do right now. Yep. You know, and that was your judgment of where I should have been on my path.
It was also the inability to see that everybody needs to explore their own path. And
Exactly.
Still that same idea that I had when I was younger, that there is a single path.
Right.
There just isn't a single path, guys. If it's not clear through all of our conversation, it doesn't exist.
No, and the path has to be something that's very deep. It has to be something that you search for on your own. You connect to this inner knowing, your own intuition. No one can tell you what you should be doing, who you should be dating, who you should be loving, who your friends should be doing, what your passion should be. You are the only one that knows that. And to uncover that is part of the journey. And for my particular relationship with a D, when we had these experiences of cheating, it wasn't about the cheating. It was about these deeper issues that we had that we needed to work on. And luckily, we wanted to support one another in our broken places to be the best versions of who we could be, because we both saw this beauty in each other.
Yeah.
We both saw this potential. And so we had partners in each other that were seeing each other as our best selves and were willing to do the work. If one of the partners isn't willing to do the work, that is a reason to leave.
Totally. And I think, again, as we're talking about this inclusive concept of help and helping people grow, I mean, if you listen to the different people we had this month, I had Dr. Ken talking about ketamine. I got arrested and went to jail for ketamine. It's now a legal therapeutic. So what was right? Like, was it correct back then? Was it supposed to be illegal and nobody could use it? Or is it right now that people are using it therapeutically? You get to choose, but you don't get to be right. You get to choose the choice for yourself.
Well, you can be right for what's right for you.
Sure. Alexandra Roxo came and talked to us about her book and, Fuck Like a Goddess. And this whole concept, guys, that is all ancient wisdom stuff that is not incredibly grounded in scientific literature and studies, because as a scientist, I'll tell you, it's pretty hard to study the kind of stuff Alexandra talks about. So do you want to follow that embodied, holistic,
Intuitive,
and respect the cultural heritage and the world knowledge that comes from the work that she does, or does that seem too woo-woo for you? We talked again, and like when Nicole Perlo and the Holistic Psychologist came, I was part of a psychology training program. I know the science base. I get it, but
it's one path.
It's one path. Guys, up until 1973, homosexuality was a recognized mental health disorder. I'm going to say that again. 1973, not that long ago. If you were gay, you were psychologically unfit. You had a medical disorder.
Insanity.
By the American Psychiatric Association. So I'm not saying everything in psychiatry and everything in psychology is wrong. Go see my TEDx talk. But I'm definitely letting you know this is not 100% fact. It's just not. And so the idea that you only get to use currently accepted knowledge, it avoids one of the big evolutionary points of what it means to be human, and that is growth.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was actually really interesting. One of the people who really critiqued our podcast with Nicole, in the next post after they critiqued her, said that these ancient wisdoms of other paths outside of the Western society need to be acknowledged as equally well as the ones that come from scientific literature in the West. So let's get away from this limiting belief internally that our view of the world is the view of the world.
Yeah.
Because even if your view is amazing, you're keeping a lot of people out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so sad. Like, I remember being in that place. You remember being in that place. Like, it's a feeling of being stuck all the time. You're just kind of stuck because you can't see out there. You just have one tunnel vision way of seeing the world. And the minute that you crack that open and let the love and let the light in, you see so many different pathways and so many different ways, and there is not one way. And that's really freeing. There's a freedom in opening up the door and being like, I can go any direction I choose as long as I'm being true to myself.
And then all the intuition stuff that you talk about,
Right.
Sophie, is really, really important because you have to learn how to pay attention. You will make turns that feel right at one moment, and then 2 months, 3 weeks, 5 days, 4 hours, 6 years after you make them, you get a feeling, you go, oh, I don't think I need to do this anymore.
And the feeling becomes sharper and louder the more you listen to it. So it'll happen quicker. Like a lot of my friends in dating right now, they're in the dating world, and it might take a year to get out of a bad relationship, and then it might take 6 months, and then it might take 3 months, and then it takes 3 weeks or one date to say
Nope.
this is not the right fit for me. He would make a great friend or not.
Or not.
Or just, I don't need this in my life. It takes a lot of energy to let people into your world. It takes a lot of energy. Like I'm recognizing within myself as a mother of 3 with multiple businesses and a beautiful relationship with my husband that takes a lot of work and effort to maintain. That lifeboat, I don't want to let a lot of people onto that lifeboat. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm taking care of so many people on that lifeboat, but I'm thrilled to take care of them. Now, there could be a couple people hanging on to the side of the lifeboat, and I might give them some food and I might give them some water, but they're not going to be climbing onto the lifeboat because I am taking care of enough people, and it serves me and my best, highest good to do so. It makes me have a beautiful life with beautiful experiences, but I don't have room for much more. And
Thankfully it's summer, so the water's pretty warm, so it's around your boat.
They're fine. But yeah, I just feel like it takes a certain amount of maturity to recognize what it is you need and what's right for you. And the faster and the quicker that you can authentically get to that place, the better, because you're not wasting your time with like relationships that aren't serving your highest good or experiences. And also, how beautiful are the experiences during our teenage years and our 20s and beyond. I'm sure we'll continue having a lot, but they are just less common. Those mistakes that we make like also serve us. They're not bad. They're just lessons. They're tools.
I mean, I think what we're saying is all the experiences are tools and lessons, right? We label them as bad and good. I was just talking to a client earlier today, and she said, well, some things are objectively bad. And I talked about the example I've given a handful of times before. And I almost lost my leg in that motorcycle accident. But that was also the thing that got me arrested so I could clean up my act and get serious about the rest of my life. So I'm here now. So was breaking both bones in my shin, was that a good thing or a bad thing? It looked really bad in the moment, but it turned out to be really good. So you put a label on it and decide what you want to call it. I consider it one of the best things that ever happened to me. And saying breaking my leg was one of the best things that ever happened to me sounds crazy to people who didn't go through my experience.
And same for our cheating. I have said over and over again for the last 10 years to our groups that we used to go to every Sunday, to my friends and any clients that come, I'm like, I know this may sound completely insane, but the cheating that Adi and I went through on both sides of the relationship were the biggest, most amazing, earth-shattering experiences for our growth and for the best version of who we can be. We have elevated so many times from the mistakes we've made in our relationship. And that's why we love to lean into it. And you guys know that if you listen to our podcast regularly, we love to lean into discomforts because on the other side of that is us feeling closer and more intimate.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody watches our introduction to a radically transparent relationship workshop or any of the other stuff that we've done, or if somebody attended one of our couples workshops, you know that we actually try to get you to identify and then address these conflicts instead of get away from them as often as we can, because that's where you're going to experience the most growth. Some of my own clients, some of the people we've helped before, they're like, how did you get to the place where you actually look forward to those conflicts? And I said, because we rewrote the meaning of them.
Yeah.
They're no longer problems.
It's not a quote bad thing. It's not a quote scary thing. It's something that we know on the other side of that conversation, on the other side of being radically transparent, on the other side of telling the truth in something that's uncomfortable will be something that feels way more connected. So therefore, it's not so scary.
That's what I love about our community and I wish this wasn't going on right now. We could have our our Glow event happening, which would really be happening literally within 2 or 3 months. But again, there will be an opportunity. Something will come out of that didn't otherwise. But what I love about our community is it's full of people who've hurt before or have seen pain around them and have come to the understanding that they have to uncover what's underneath it. They have to understand it at a deeper level than just a symptomatic, explicit, what's in front of your eyes in order to grow. And I feel like obviously there are more and more people moving in that direction in society in general, but our community, I feel, is incredibly empowered in that way.
Yeah. And I think also our community just really just needs to continue to come together and support all of us, all of you, anyone who's listening. We all need to just be better at supporting one another versus tearing each other down versus like, it's just been hard online these days. And all we have is online.
But I think that's why it's so hard is everybody thinks they're right.
Yeah.
That's what I think is so hard. I mean, you and I go through this a lot, and I try to, I don't know how you feel I do on this, but like, I try to be a moderate voice of reason, and not in the political sense, but in the like, okay, we just heard something that either sounds amazing to us or terrible to us. Let's dig one layer below and see if there's a real reason to care about it, if it really matters, if it's relevant to what's happening. You know, we're in this new age where access to information is so insane. Like, how crazy is it? Look, in the world that we lived in 10, 15 years ago, if Molly, if she hated our hated us, hated our message, hated what we stood for, we never would have heard from her.
Right. She would have just
She
turned
would
it
have
off.
just been somebody who just got away from it. We get to incorporate what she says because of this world of constantly enveloping information that is just floating around and we all get to catch. The thing is that our brains have a hard time paying attention to all of it. And so what happens, and it's why I wanted to read that review, what happens for most of us is we completely ignore the things that don't align with the way we feel about the world. We take in only things that appeal to it. We live in a world where Instagram and Facebook and news algorithms, etc., do that better than ever before. So we get served more and more stuff that already proves that the world is what we thought. And then we end up with more and more people who are just completely convinced because all they see is support of it. All their friends support it. They are more and more convinced that the way they see the world is 100% the right way.
Yeah.
And if we keep doing this, guys, we're heading to war.
Yeah, it's
just going to keep getting worse.
Separation, fear of the other. That's where we're heading.
I mean, you're so good at this. Like, we don't talk about it much here, guys, because first of all, it's really heavy, and secondly, some of it is personal, but it's even less about that. It's like an ongoing thing, so it's hard to do. But Sophie, whether you've seen her on social media or happens in our personal life as well, you're one of the people that I know who's better than anybody else at even, you're still a bull, so even as you're holding on to this belief, staying in a conversation with somebody when it's so uncomfortable that you're, even on text, you're like crying on the other side. Mm-hmm. You're texting to somebody else, you're not even talking, but you're bawling on the other side, holding on and trying to connect with the person on the other that has different
and
beliefs.
Make peace.
And some of them are really, really close friends of ours, and some people are more distant, and some of them are people you don't know at all and just decided to comment on a post.
I've been this way my entire life, but it's definitely intensified over the last 6 months with all of the political issues and humanitarian issues and the intensity, not being able to see friends and family. And it's been so intense. And the amount of conversations in that time period that I had with people we love, our near and dear best friends and family. But yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, it's like, am I willing to put our differences aside and just accept this person because I love them? And maybe we have 15 years of friendship. Maybe, my own like stepmother, my father, like all the things that I feel how he didn't show up as the father I wish he were, my mother, and like how I wish she would have shown up in these different ways for me and my brother and my sister. I can hold on to all those things from the past, or I can focus on the differences that one of my best girlfriends and I of 15, 16 years, who I love so much, I can focus on those differences and keep us separate, or we can speak to them to the best of our ability. Some of these relationships I just described, we just can't go there. Like, my mom and I are not going to go through the history of my childhood because it's just too deep, too hard. We've tried with therapists. They literally walk out of the conversations and literally the therapists that we have hired throughout the years to help us have just walked away and been like, you guys are it's just too much.
And this is like online therapy before anybody was doing online therapy. And the therapist was like, yeah, we're done.
Yep, I can't do this anymore.
We got to end.
So the therapist quit multiple times on my mother and I. So it's like some things are okay to just be left in the past. Some things are okay for me to believe my childhood was this way and for her to believe that it was another way. And that's okay.
I think when you started having the willingness in that relationship, because you have willingness in a lot of others, but when you start having willingness in that relationship, you started changing your tune about even some of the things that happened earlier on.
Yeah.
You were able to listen to her in a different way, understanding, look, this is her view. And then once you can listen to the other person without trying to poke holes in it, without trying to divide it, without trying to chop it down, you go, oh, you know what? She's right. When we moved a lot, I was sometimes the one who said, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to leave. Whereas before it was always her.
Yeah.
Always her. And I saw it. I saw the changing. I saw the softening. And by the way, for everybody listening, because I'm sure some of you have strained relationships with loved ones, your relationship now is completely different than what it was back then.
Right.
It's not like you get the same relationship that you had when you were kids or anything like that. You now have an adult version of that relationship.
Yeah. We're not that close, but I love her. She loves me, and we can tell each other that. She can love on my children from afar, from close. She came and visited. You can heal so many beautiful aspects of a relationship by just being present to what is. And I'm in this constant work with my dad and my stepmom right now. That's where we're at, is like, can we just leave the past in the past? Because going back there actually doesn't serve us. And with some people it does. I have some girlfriends and some best friends and some, like my sister and I, we are in this place now where we are going deep, talking about things from our childhood that we just need to process together. And we have different views, and I'll enlighten her in something and she'll enlighten me. She had a viewpoint of the way my childhood was better, different, prettier, sparklier. And I have an impression of her, and it feels good to be able to go at that together, but not everyone can do that. So meeting the relationship and the person that's in the relationship where they are, and having a willingness to just be present to that relationship and that person, to what is right now and what you want for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think you have a much closer relationship to your mom now than I've ever known you.
Sure.
Now, if you're talking back to when you were 3, 4, 6 years old, I'm sure you're not as close as you were back then.
It's a different kind
you're
of
also
closeness.
Not dependent on her.
It's also, exactly, I'm not dependent on anyone anymore, which is hard for parents, right? They're like, hey, don't you need me? And
there's a name for that. It's called individuation in psychology. It's when you see yourself finally separate from your parents, you can have different beliefs, do different things, be independent, and make choices for yourself.
Yeah, and it's like the most liberating thing I've ever been through, because I don't need anything. I don't need money from them. I don't need love. I don't need acceptance. I don't need them to tell me I did a good job or they're proud of me. Would I like those things? Sometimes maybe, but for the most part, there's so many strings attached to it that I actually don't.
Yeah.
And I think overall, what we really wanted to talk about, when it comes to all of this, is this willingness, and that healing requires a willingness. And with you and I in our relationship, we both had to be willing to do the work and to show up to one another. And
to change, to recognize that the way we do things and see things is not the end all be all. Again, I was sitting here with clients just yesterday, and just this concept of, okay, I've always done things this way. My partner gets conflicted and triggered when I do them this way. We say this a lot, so if you know this, but do I want to be right and say, no, my way has happened for 20 years, it has to stay this way? Or do I want to figure out a different way of being so that I can have happiness and joy with my loved one?
What we always say, and if you haven't heard this yet, is, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? Do I want to help the situation move forward and so there's peace, or do I need to be right? And there's a time and place for being right, but in relationships and when in healing, we're talking about the micro and the macro in this episode. We're talking about the micro with our inner self, and do I want to be happy right now or do I want to be right? And then we're talking about the macro in the world right now. Do we need to be separated? Because separation is created because all of these people think they need to be right. So Democrats are right, Republicans are right. And now we've got two opposites that create separation. Yeah. And again, if we keep moving down this path, you guys, and if we can't find a way to bridge the gap and have conversations with people that think differently, believe differently, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We're in trouble. So, a lot of us in this country are sick. A lot of us are tired. They're making poor decisions. They're exhausted. They've been home for 5 months with their children with no childcare. They don't have health insurance. Like, people are suffering right now. How can we help each other? How can we have a willingness to help one another?
It's funny, even as you talk about that, because you and I have endless conversations about these topics, but as you talk about it, there's these little trigger words, and I even feel myself, they don't have health insurance. And like the liberal part of me shows up and is like, yeah, but I have an answer for that. And all those things are kind of what I'm saying. We need to collectively calm ourselves. Like maybe do some breathing exercises, practice a little meditation before you start having these conversations, because we do get triggered into our automatic, right? That's what the brain does, is it creates predictable ways of doing things, and it'll just do them over and over and over. But if we keep doing these things over and over and over the way we've been doing them for the last 5, 10, 15 years, the level of alienation, I don't even understand what's going to happen anymore. I feel like we're so fucking close to a civil war here. It's insane.
Yep.
And
what do we want right now, guys? The macro view. Do we want to be fucking right, or do we want to be happy? We want to be happy. We want our lives back. Like, we can all say like, oh, it's the new normal. Most of us are not super thrilled with this being our new normal, that we can't walk around without masks, that we are all, fighting and have our boxing gloves up all the time. Like, we need to make internal shifts and changes to heal so that you then can come from that healed place into your world.
Yeah. Man, I'm so happy I'm not a politician.
Right.
Was it you? We were in conversation a little while back, and one of you was like, you would be really good.
You would.
Yeah.
You'd be a great politician, and it would make you crazy.
Well, the reason is we're here having essentially like a philosophical discussion. And in the end, I get it. This gets hard because you have to make specific decisions about how much money is going to go here and who's going to do what and on what days. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and it gets really, really difficult to do. And, you talked about willingness as the last piece here. I don't know. I'm going to wrap it back around to it's the same as the level of willingness you need to have to show up to a relationship where somebody fucked up badly, and to show up and say, hey, how do we figure out if this relationship is worth saving?
Yeah, and talk about women empowerment. Like, I laid down the motherfucking law, you guys. Like, I was empowered as shit. I was like, oh, you see you down on your hands and knees, bro. My ring is off. I am fucking 1 foot out the door, maybe both in a moment.
I think you were like 1 foot in the door. You were like doing a downward dog, like a 3-legged downward dog with one leg in the house, and the rest of it was out.
I was out, except there was this openness to, you have an opportunity right here and now to really fully show up, Adi. And I looked you in the eyes, you were crying, and I said, this is it. This better be the last thing that I ever find out. And you promised me. And then you went and got help. And
we shut shit down. Again, we talked about this before to you guys, but like, I didn't text. I think it's literally been only in the last few years. So it's been 10 years. And I think maybe in the last 2 or 3 years that we first got comfortable with me even having a text conversation
with a woman
without you being on the chain.
Yeah.
It's still like 90% of our conversations are still with other people. We've essentially created this radical transparency thing nobody taught us it.
No.
Everybody actually was against it. But we were like, hey, if this is translucent and transparent, there is no hiding, and we will be able to save our relationship.
Exactly. And we did what we needed to do to feel safe. And right now, we all just need to feel safe. Our society wants to feel safe. Most people don't. They're stuck in fear. They're stuck in their houses because they're stuck in fear.
Yeah.
The only way out is through. The only way through is through. We must get through this.
Yeah.
How
absolutely.
are we going to get through this? With a willingness to open up your heart and choose, instead of being right, being happy. And for the collective. Yes, for yourself, for your family, but for the collective.
Yeah.
And again, like Adi said, this is philosophical. We're not leaving you with specific homework and like, go do this now and email this person. Your homework is to dig deep and to see, what is it that you want to feel happy? What can you contribute to the overall happiness in your local community and in your community?
And then what willingness do you have within you to create that change?
Yeah.
Because, I just gave that speech for the freshman class at Albright College, Go Lions. And what I was telling them was, look, this is a crazy time. But those of you who are old enough to listen, crazy shit happens all the time. Yeah. it's up to us.
We're in a cycle
to react and correspond to the external pressures in the way that make our life better. So it's all up to us.
And how can we take responsibility? So instead of, I can take responsibility that in the beginning of the few months of quarantine, I was a victim, and I definitely fell into the trap of having a victim mentality. And this is happening to me and to us, and this sucks. Now it's not happening to me. It's happening for me. What can I do? How can I grow? How can I see this differently? What changes can we make as a society? Let us let all the systems fall the fuck down, fall apart, because they were deeply flawed. We are deeply flawed in this country and in the world. There are some really fucked up systems. How can we let them all fall and then reset? And that's where we're at right now. So let's see the beauty while also taking responsibility and seeing how we can have a willingness to heal.
Love it. So for those of you listening right now, as you know, we always want to hear from you. Obviously, you don't even have to like us, and we want to hear from you. So leave us some messages. There's a lot in this episode. Let us know, how are you changing the world? What are you doing to not stay stuck in this one way to see the world and everything is correct and I never need to adjust? And what are you willing to do? We can't wait to hear from you. Thank you all so much. Our theme for next month is one of my favorite things ever, F-shame. I'm really, really excited to jump into that. I know Sophie's a big believer in it as well.
Yep. It's going to be awesome. Cannot wait.
Have a beautiful rest of the week.
And be sure to tag us on social, and we will reshare, and we can't wait to see what resonated from this episode.
Amen. See you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.